Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed. Today we're really diving deep, pulling insights straight from Chapter 1 of Raven Biology of Plants, 8th edition. Our goal here is to unpack how life, especially plant life, just completely reshaped our planet. We'll look at the incredible ways plants adapted to conquer land and, why understanding them is more critical than ever. Let's kick things off with a really powerful quote from Nobel laureate Albert Szent-Györgyi. What drives life is a little current kept up by the sunshine. He's talking about photosynthesis, right? That amazing process that captures the sun's energy to make sugars food, basically for almost all life, and as a bonus, gives us the oxygen we breathe. It's not just chemistry. It fundamentally redirected Earth's whole future. So today we're exploring how that started, how plants made the jump from water to land, and just how vital they are. This isn't just facts about plants. It's about understanding life itself.
Absolutely. And it's woven into our lives in ways we often don't even notice. I mean, the word botany itself comes from the Greek botane, plant, and boskein, to feed. And that's key because plants feed us in so many ways beyond just, well, food. Think clothes, shelter, medicine, spices, and yeah, the air we breathe. Plus, there's the sheer beauty and scientific wonder they offer. It's a really exciting time for botany now, with new tech helping us tackle big global issues using plants. And, just to give a hint of the evolutionary journey we're about to trace, think about something like a water lily, Nymphaea fabiola, for example. It actually went back to living in water, but it still carries clues from its land-based ancestors, like it has a waxy outer layer, a cuticle, to resist drying out even though it's in water. And it has stomata, those little pores for gas exchange, and a proper internal transport system, all hints of a past life on land.
Okay, so let's unpack that whole story, starting way back at the beginning. Earth's about 4.6 billion years old. Its early history was, well, violent. Constant meteor impacts, intense storms, lightning, volcanoes. A really harsh place. That intense bombardment finally eased up around 3.8 to 3.9 billion years ago. But incredibly, life got started. The earliest known fossils, found over in Western Australia, date back 3.5 billion years. They look like simple, thread-like microbes, sort of like bacteria. And around the same time, we see these ancient things called stromatolites, fossilized mats of microbes. They suggest that early organisms, maybe like cyanobacteria, were already active.
Right, and that raises the huge question, where did life even come from? Was it homegrown here on Earth, or did it maybe arrive from space? There's some tantalizing evidence for Mars. The Opportunity rover found signs of past flowing water back in 2004. Then, the Phoenix Mars lander found water ice in 2008, even a daily water cycle. And in 2011, evidence for liquid salty water. Now, they didn't find organic molecules at the Phoenix site, but meteorites hitting Earth do contain organic stuff. So the idea of past life on Mars isn't completely out there. But for now, the main theories assume life did start here on Earth. And the idea is that all living things share a common ancestor, some kind of DNA-based microbe from way back over 3.5 billion years ago. Darwin himself kind of hinted at this.
Okay, so how did life actually, get going? How did those first cells form? Well, the idea is that organic molecules, maybe formed by lightning or near hydrothermal vents, started clumping together in the early oceans, sort of like oil droplets in water. There was work by Sidney W. Fox showing these proteinoid microspheres could form, grow, and even bud like cells, though they weren't truly alive. But these early cells faced a problem, an energy crisis. They were heterotrophs. That's Greek for other feeders, like animals or fungi. Think of an aspen mushroom or some bacteria. They just consumed the organic molecules that were already floating around. But as they multiplied, they started using up this limited food source.
Which, yeah, leads to the crucial question, how did life keep going? How did it survive running out of its initial food supply? The answer was a revolutionary step. The evolution of autotrophs, self-feeders. These organisms figured out how to make their own energy-rich molecules from simple inorganic stuff. Honestly, without autotrophs, life probably would have just died out.
And the most successful autotrophic system by far was photosynthesis, right? Using sunlight. This involved evolving complex pigment systems to capture that light energy and store it. And the evidence suggests this was happening incredibly early, maybe 3.4 billion years ago. Think of modern examples like trilliums or birch trees, all powered by this ancient process.
Yeah, and it's super important to remember heterotrophs came first. They were the original consumers. But once photosynthesis evolved, it set up the energy flow we still see today. Sun to photosynthesizers, and then photosynthesizers feeding pretty much everyone else, including us.
Okay, and this is where things get really interesting on a planetary scale. The rise of photosynthesis didn't just create food. It fundamentally changed the atmosphere. As these photosynthetic organisms thrived and multiplied, they started splitting water molecules, H2O, and releasing the O, free oxygen, O2, as waste. And we can actually see the evidence of this ancient oxygen buildup in the rocks. Before about 2.2 billion years ago, any oxygen released immediately reacted with dissolved iron in the oceans. This caused iron oxides, basically rust, to precipitate out and settle on the ocean floor. Today, we see these layers as banded iron formations. You can see them in places like Jasper Knob in Michigan striking red bands of rock, a geological footprint of oxygen's arrival.
Exactly. And connecting this to the big picture, this oxygen increase had like two monumental consequences for how life evolved. First, some of that oxygen drifted up into the outer atmosphere and got converted into ozone, O3. Over millions of years, this built up. By about 450 million years ago, this ozone layer was thick enough to start absorbing most of the sun's harmful ultraviolet UV radiation. That protection was absolutely crucial. It allowed life to survive near the surface of the water and eventually to make the jump onto land. Without the ozone shield, land would have remained deadly. And the second big thing, all that free oxygen opened the door for aerobic respiration. This process uses oxygen to break down food molecules, and it's way more efficient than anaerobic processes, the kind that don't use oxygen. It yields much more energy.
Right? So more energy available, which fueled more complex life. And this atmospheric shift also drove massive changes inside the cells themselves, didn't it? Before oxygen was common, for billions of years, all life consisted of prokaryotic cells. These are simple cells. No nucleus wrapping the DNA, no complex chromosomes. Think archaea, the ancient ones, in bacteria. Some were heterotrophs, some autotrophs like the cyanobacteria. But then with oxygen becoming plentiful, eukaryotic cells emerged, maybe around 2.1 billion years ago. These were a major upgrade, much larger, way more complex. They have a proper nucleus, complex chromosomes, and specialized little organs inside called organelles like mitochondria, the powerhouses using that oxygen for respiration, and in plants and algae, chloroplasts for photosynthesis. By 1.2 billion years ago, eukaryotes were well established, and today pretty much all the organisms you can see, us included, are eukaryotic. There's a huge leap in complexity, powered by oxygen.
Yeah, it's amazing how the environment itself sort of pushed life towards becoming more complex. You see this especially near the coasts. Those early microscopic photosynthesizers out in the open ocean probably started using up the dissolved minerals they needed. So life was driven towards the shores, where rivers and waves constantly brought in fresh nutrients. But the shoreline, especially rocky coasts, is a rough place, constant waves crashing. So in response, organisms started getting more complex. Multicellularity, having many cells working together in one body, evolved, probably multiple times independently. We see evidence going back at least 650 million years. Think about kelp, those big brown algae you see anchored to rocks today. That's a good example of this kind of adaptation. These early multicellular forms developed ways to anchor themselves, stronger structures for support, and even basic tissues to move food and water around, especially to parts that weren't directly in the sunlight.
So that takes us to the next big frontier, actually colonizing land, which sounds amazing, but for something living in water, what was the main hurdle to overcome?
Well, as one researcher apparently put it was simply the air, or more specifically, the lack of easily available water in the air. Land has plenty of light, plenty of CO2, oxygen, minerals in the soil, but water isn't just surrounding you anymore. That's the big challenge. Animals, well, they can move around and find water sources, but plants are generally stuck in one place. So they had to evolve a different strategy. They developed specialized structures, and these are really perfected in the group we call vascular plants. First off, roots. These anchor the plant firmly in the ground, but crucially, they absorb water and essential minerals from the soil. Then you have stems. These provide support, lifting the photosynthetic parts, the leaves, up towards the sunlight. And connecting everything is the vascular system. Think of it like the plant's plumbing. It runs through the roots, stem, and leaves. It has two key parts. Xylem, which conducts water and dissolved minerals up from the roots. It's like a continuous pipe system. And phloem, which transports the sugars made during photosynthesis, the plant's food, from the leaves down to other parts like roots or fruits. This whole efficient transport network is what gives vascular plants their name.
Okay, so if you picture like a typical garden bean plan, you can see all this, right? There's the root system hidden underground. And then above ground is the shoot system, the stem, the leaves. The points where leaves attach are called nodes, and the stem sections between them are internodes. And the leaves themselves are like these specialized solar panels, perfectly shaped to capture light for photosynthesis, all connected by that vascular plumbing.
Oh.
But wait, there's a catch-22 here, isn't there? How do plants get the sunlight and the CO2 they need from the air for photosynthesis without just drying out completely? Well, the first line of defense is that waxy cuticle we mentioned earlier. It's a layer covering the epidermis, the outer skin of all the above-ground parts, and it's really good at slowing down water loss. But like you said, it also blocks gases from getting in or out, which is a problem if you need CO2.
Exactly. So plants evolved an incredibly clever solution, stomata. These are basically tiny adjustable pores, mostly on the surface of leaves. Each stoma, that's the singular, is surrounded by a pair of specialized guard cells. You can imagine them like tiny lips that can open or close the pore. They regulate this constant trade-off, opening just enough to let CO2 in for photosynthesis and let oxygen out, while trying to minimize how much water vapor escapes. It's a delicate balancing act happening all the time. And another really cool adaptation of plants, especially compared to many animals, is that they keep growing throughout their lives. This continuous growth happens in special zones of embryonic tissue called meristems. These regions can just keep dividing and adding new cells indefinitely. You've got apical meristems right at the very tips of the roots and the shoots. These are responsible for primary growth, basically, making the plant longer. Roots push deeper into the soil, shoots reach higher towards the light. Then in many plants, you also have lateral meristems, like the vascular cambium and cork cambium. These allow for secondary growth, which is growth in thickness, making stems and roots wider and stronger over time.
Okay, and the last big challenge for living on land, reproduction. How do you reproduce when you're not surrounded by water anymore? This needed some major changes. Well, early land plants evolved things like drought-resistant spores that could survive dry conditions. Then they developed more complex, multicellular structures that actually protected the gametes, the sperm and eggs, from drying out, often by enclosing them in a jacket of sterile cells. And then came the ultimate innovation, especially in seed plants. It's most of the plants we see around us, everything except ferns and mosses, pretty much. The seed. A seed is just an amazing package deal. It contains a tiny embryonic plant, a built-in food supply to give it a head start, and a tough protective outer coat, all provided by the parent plant. It protects the embryo from harsh conditions and helps it disperse.
Yeah, exactly. So you pull it all together, the roots, the stems, that vascular plumbing, the cuticle, the stomata, those ever-growing meristems, and finally the protected gametes and seeds. It's this whole elegant suite of adaptations. They all work together, allowing plants to thrive in the challenging but rewarding terrestrial environment. It's really the story of mastering life on land through photosynthesis.
And this invasion of land by plants didn't just change the plants themselves, it fundamentally changed the face of the earth, leading to what we call biomes, these huge natural communities, defined by the types of plants that can grow there because of the climate. Think of the massive differences between, say, a temperate deciduous forest, the Arctic tundra, an African savanna, a lush tropical rainforest, or a dry desert. The plants define those landscapes.
Right, and these plant communities, together with the non-living parts of their environment, the soil, the water, the climate, they form ecosystems. What's really fascinating about ecosystems is their sort of inherent stability. All the organisms within them are interconnected. Even though they compete, they also provide food for each other, and they contribute to this orderly cycling of essential elements, things like nitrogen, phosphorus. Energy flows through always needing input from the sun, but the actual materials get recycled. And crucially, plants, along with algae and some bacteria, form the base of productivity in almost every single ecosystem on Earth. They're the primary producers. They're the only ones making new organic molecules from scratch using sunlight and releasing that vital oxygen. They support almost all other life, the heterotrophs, which are actually about 20 times more numerous than the photosynthesizers themselves. That includes us.
Okay, so where do we, human beings, fit into this grand picture? We're incredibly recent arrivals on the scene. If you imagine Earth's history as a 24-hour clock, humans only show up in about the last half minute before midnight. But in that short time, especially since the invention of agriculture around 10,500 years ago, we've had a massive impact. Agriculture allowed our populations to grow, leading to villages, towns, cities, complex societies, and eventually the diversification of culture, including the development of botany, the actual science of studying plants. And botany today is, well, it's huge. It covers everything from plant physiology, how they work, and anatomy, their structure, to genetics, genomics, ecology, economic botany. It's incredibly diverse. Traditionally, botany also kind of loops in the study of prokaryotes, fungi, and algae, mainly because their ecological roles are so tightly linked with plants. Think nitrogen-fixing bacteria and roots, or mycorrhizal fungi helping plants get nutrients.
Which brings us right back to the really critical question now. Why is understanding all this botany stuff so vital for us today and for our future? We're facing some enormous global challenges. How do we feed a population expected to hit 9 billion people by 2050? How do we find sustainable, renewable energy sources? Modern plants offer potential here, just like ancient plants gave us the fossil fuels we've relied on. And then there are the big environmental problems. Pollution, the damage to the ozone layer from things like CFCs, global warming, which is getting worse due to increased CO2, nitrogen oxides, methane, and the really alarming rate at which we're losing biodiversity. But the exciting part is that plants are increasingly seen as key parts of the solution. Take phytoremediation, for example. That's using plants to clean up polluted environments. We've seen sunflowers used to soak up radioactive cesium and strontium from lakes near Chernobyl. Poplar and willow trees can draw up fuel contaminants from groundwater. Pickleweed can remove selenium from agricultural runoff. It's pretty amazing. And then there's genetic engineering. Since the 1970s, we've been able to create transgenic plants with genes added from other organisms to give them useful traits. Think about golden rice, engineered to have more beta-carotene and iron to fight malnutrition, or maize and cotton modified with bacterial genes to resist insect pests. Papaya is resistant to ring spot virus, which was devastating the crop. Soybeans tolerant to herbicides like Roundup, making weed control easier. Even citrus trees engineered to flower in just 6 months instead of taking 6 to 20 years. Imagine speeding up fruit breeding like that. And looking ahead, the possibilities are mind-boggling. Scientists are working on making photosynthesis itself more efficient to boost crop yields, creating plants with waxier leaves to save water or even cool the local air, developing biodegradable plastics made by plants, healthier oils, maybe even anti-cancer proteins produced in plants, or vaccines delivered orally like that potential hepatitis B vaccine in bananas. And beyond all the high-tech stuff, we're also recognizing more and more just how important green spaces are for our well-being, especially in our increasingly urban world. Look at projects like the High Line in New York City, an old, abandoned, elevated railway line transformed into this incredible, vibrant linear park. Or Magnuson Park in Seattle, where a former naval air station was converted into thriving wetlands. These projects show how we can integrate nature back into our lives.
Wow, we've really covered some ground today, haven't we? From the fiery birth of Earth, those first sparks of life, the incredible impact of photosynthesis, the whole journey plants took from water to land, developing all those amazing adaptations, and how they now form the foundation of the ecosystems that sustain absolutely everything, including us. It really drives home how connected everything is.
Absolutely. Couldn't it be clearer? Plants aren't just, pleasant background scenery. They're fundamental, essential for the planet's ecology, its biodiversity, its climate stability. And understanding botany, understanding how plants work and how they evolved is just paramount if we're going to make smart decisions about our future and tackle these huge challenges we face.
So for you, our curious learner listening in, what was the most surprising thing you heard about this incredible journey of plants? What new ideas or possibilities does the world of botany spark for you when thinking about solutions for the future? Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and definitely take a moment to appreciate the profound, life-giving power of the green world all around us.